Now it's time for today's perspective. I'm going to start off by reading you a quote, in fact. In peaceful times, I might have written convoluted or simply descriptive books, and I might have had only a vague awareness of my political leanings. Circumstances forced me to become a kind of pamphleteer. Now, if you know it, it's a quote from George Orwell, in fact. It's a quote also that sets the stage for what is the fifth book now of my guest here on the programme today, Ta-Nehisi Coates. Very well known as a progressive American author, journalist and activist, known predominantly for his writing on African Americans and on white supremacy. His latest book, The Message, also now translated into French as very easily, simply Le Message, and he joins us here on set. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us on the programme. Obviously a quote that has inspired you. I mean, why has it inspired you? Why did you decide to put that quote in your book? So
that's from Orwell's book, from his essay, How I Write. And it captures, I think, his discomfort with the fact that on one level, he appreciates the aesthetics and loves the beauty of writing and words themselves, but realizes that given the times that he lives in, he has to put those words to political ends. But his first love, and maybe even his disposition, is not necessarily a contrary one or a political one. And when I read that, I was like, wow, I really, really feel that.
Yeah. I mean, looking at what you've done and what you've written, I mean, it certainly sort of sums up, if you like, your career as well. I mean, in the book, you trace the history, don't you, of a particular kind of nationalism through some of the places that you visited, some of those places, Senegal, South Carolina, as well as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I mean, why did you pick those three places to feature them?
You know, books for me are experiments. Every book is different. You know, I had long wanted to write a book about arts and culture and writing and the power of it and its intersection with politics. And I'm not the kind of writer that can just sort of stay at my desk and do that. I have to see things. I have to see places. I did not know what I was going to find. In fact, one of my great fears was that I would go to these places and they wouldn't necessarily fit what I was writing about. In the case of Senegal, it was the fact that I had never been there. You know, I'd never been to Africa, in fact, and I knew that was something that, you know, I needed to do to, you know, complete my life or to be part of, you know, the completion of my life. South Carolina, the fact that I was somewhat frustrated with the fact that we as authors, in the face of book banning, never went to the places where our books were being banned and had a conversation about it. And obviously into Palestine, because some of my earlier work necessitated that I go.
I mean, some of the most powerful moments in the book are when you talk about that. You talk a lot, don't you, about the racism that you encountered when you were there.
Yes, which was different because I was not necessarily the subject of it. It was extremely, extremely weird. I think, you know, as a Black American, we get very much used to living under the weight of what has been termed as separate but equal, but was really separate and unequal, and then to go somewhere else to see people using different roads, to see people subject to different license plates, to see people subject to different levels of housing and ultimately to different justice systems. It was like time traveling back into my grandparents' time.
There was one incident that I know you talk about when you came out of a hotel and you were an Israeli soldier came up to you. Tell us what happened there.
Yeah, he basically asked me, you know, do you belong here? You know what I mean? I had to produce my key card and everything. But what's interesting about that is the do you belong here did not feel like because you're Black. It was almost, this is complicated, an ethnocentrism without a white supremacy or a racism directed to me. It was like, are you a member of this tribe or not? You know? And after all I had seen, that was towards the end of my trip. You know, it was bracing, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, always known for your writing, of course. I mean, what has it been like to see yourself as such a reference, if you like, for many, of course, such positive worldwide reference on African Americans and on white supremacy as well?
Bizarre and deeply uncomfortable.
Why uncomfortable?
Well, I mean, it goes back to that quote, in fact. You know, like, I think of myself as a homebody and a relatively nice guy who, you know, just wants to do regular, you know, pretty ordinary things. I just happen to really, really like books and really, really like reading and find myself in a situation where my conscience will not allow me to remain outside of politics. But there's always an element of, I wish I really didn't have to do this, you know, whenever I, you know, tackle any of these issues.
I mean, do you feel like the world is getting better, is getting stronger in these areas, or are there some areas where it's regressing even?
I don't know. I'm tempted to say we're more aware. I definitely feel that about Palestine. I definitely feel that about, you know, racism. I think we know more. I think at the same time, there's more misinformation. out there, and it's sort of shocking, how easy it is for people to, automatically buy into things. So, I don't know. I think we have obviously existential issues like climate change that are very, very different. The ability for humanity to destroy itself was never on the table until recent human history. So those are, big challenges. And I guess you have to weigh those against, obviously, the advances in public health, the advances in just, the time that human beings live and et cetera. But I don't know, it's difficult.
And the way in there you talk about yourself as just, a regular guy. I mean, other people say you're an extremist. I mean, how do you answer? How do you cope with that, if you like?
I don't know, it doesn't really bother me, It doesn't really, one of the things about the book is that I always say that I am in the tradition of, other writers who came before me. And the general response to say, Frederick Douglass, to Ida B. Wells, even to activists who were not writers, like Martin Luther King, for instance, was that they were extremists, And so I have been pretty well prepared to expect that reaction.
I mean, does it help in some ways, depending, of course, who's calling you an extremist?
Maybe. I know in the United States, the reception to that last half of the book, the sort of aggressive, it really did help. I mean, because it made people, want to see what was going on. It was so harsh that helped. But I don't know. I feel like there's certain things that I have to do. And that's probably, what I think about the most.
So what comes next? I mean, already 5 books. This is the latest now, translated into French. One of them's a novel, isn't it? I know that.
Yes,
is that something you want to explore more?
I really hope that's my next book. I'm trying to go back. I really am trying. One of the things that I do like about fiction is fiction lovers really, really love fiction. And sometimes in nonfiction, people love to argue more than they love the books.
Yeah.
So.
That's one way of looking at it.
Right.
Where does it come from in you? I mean, obviously, you're influenced by your parents. Your father founded a publishing company, in fact, that specialised in African-American titles. And you talk about him a lot in your first book.
Mm-hmm. I just was surrounded by books. My mother taught me to read very, very early. My mother, took me to the bookstore, would take me to the library as a really, small child. This is, at a difficult time in the city where I'm from, Baltimore. At a difficult, point in history in terms of violence and, things that, we were surrounded by. And so, like, libraries and books became a refuge for me. My dad, as you mentioned, was a book lover all his life. And so it was sort of natural that this is, where I would go and what I would go into.
And what you were writing about, though, that obviously came from your parents, too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was politics all through my house. Again, it was hard given the situation to be a reader and not be political would be somewhat unnatural.
When you watch what's going on in the US at the moment, we talked a little bit earlier on about whether we're more aware. US certainly more aware, but maybe going not in the right direction that you would see. No, we're not going in the right direction. But, I think one thing that, again, and I guess you can take this as a positive, I think it is certainly historically predictable that you would have some great advance, in this case, the election of a black president, and that there would be a vicious and ridiculous and broad backlash. That was true for the end of slavery in the United States. That was true for the end of Jim Crow in the United States, and it's true now. So I think it's less surprising. But you hope, of course, that it will start going the other way again. I think it always does. That generally is the rule. If we're around to see it, it's probably the question, but it generally does. Finally, you're here in Paris tonight. People can actually come and meet you. If you happen to be in Paris, you can do that later on. It's at the MK2 Cinema, MK2 Cinema at Bibliothèque Nationale. Tell us about that. I'm going to be here to answer all of the questions from the French public. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm excited about it. We will see. We will see. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us today. Ta-Nehisi Coates. The book then in French is called Le Message, in English, The Message, of course. Thanks very much once again. Thank you so much, Stuart. Thank you.